I'm going to be taking you guys through today is I'm going to be talking about how to attend cons with a disability, and if you're here, you're probably already a pro at that because you're already doing it. Wearing cosplays with a disability, making cosplays if you'd like to do the crafting yourself, and then get into social media if you'd like to be posting and running a cosplay account or posting consistently, and then at the very end talking a little bit about brand deals with a disability and being able to, if you want to, make a little money from cosplay. But first, something I want to talk about is just a little disclaimer. Whenever I see people running a panel that says how to and disability in the title, and I see one person is running it, I'm skeptical. And I think everyone should be because disability is such a wide range of things. It can be basically anything. Disability has so many ways it presents, and only having one perspective, you're not really going to get the whole story. What I did to try my absolute best to include some other viewpoints, this panel will have some advice from other disabled cosplayers. I had some friends send in advice that they would like to include. There's over 20 different disabled cosplayers featured, and everybody's going to have their Instagram handle tagged. So if you would like to follow them, the disabled cosplay community online is one of the most amazing and supportive. And I think that if you just want to find people, if a piece of advice that they've given resonates with you, you can check them out in this panel. Okay, but what about me? Why do I think I can talk about this? So hello, I'm Colleen. I run the Colleen Cosplay YouTube channel. I've been cosplaying for 10 years. I've been running the YouTube thing since 2018. I primarily do tutorial content. So I teach how to make costumes and how I make adaptive designs. So how I make costumes that work with my wheelchair. You can't really see with the table, but I'm sitting in a wheelchair. We'll get to that. And I also just share my experience of what it's been like being a disabled cosplayer. So just a little bit more specific so you know my perspective when talking about these topics, like where I'm coming from and what I'm looking for. So I have hypermobile syndrome and osteoarthritis, which causes joint pain, subluxations, and I wasn't always disabled as a cosplayer. I was an able-bodied cosplayer. I was coming to cons as an able-bodied cosplayer. I know what it's like to be healthy and attend a con. And then my disability progressed over time. So I had a knee brace, I did cons with crutches, and I've been using a wheelchair for the last few years. I am an ambulatory wheelchair user, meaning I can still move my legs and I can walk and stand for short periods of time, but not long enough to do anything meaningful, which is why I use the wheelchair a lot. So my perspective is going to be wheelchair accessibility and also chronic fatigue, chronic pain, how to manage that and do these things is how I am approaching this discussion. But hopefully with the other people adding their advice, there's something that can still be taken from this panel. So let's start with attending conventions. So when it comes to accessibility at cons, there are two big players here. The venue, so that would be the Oregon Convention Center where we are sitting in, and then the con, so that would be FanExpo Portland. I'm just going to use that as our example for this panel. Especially with larger cons that are a bit more established at places like convention centers, you can find a lot of things about accessibility on their website. So this is just a clip from the Oregon Convention Center website. They have an accessibility tab, and that should tell you everything about do they have elevators? Do they have disabled parking? Is it wheelchair accessible? And with convention centers, I've always been really lucky. They have an accessibility page, but when it comes to cons at hotels or fairgrounds or libraries or colleges, sometimes it's a little bit harder to find this info. So definitely keep that in mind. With smaller cons, you might have to actually email someone instead of finding the website. The Oregon Convention Center, if you need a wheelchair or a scooter to rent for the cons are a different story, man. You're walking a mile around a con. It is very demanding to attend a convention. So if you're I need a wheelchair to borrow just for the convention, the Oregon Convention Center offers that, and that is on their page as well. So that's just a cool accessibility thing that's offered if you need that for an event, any event happening at the Oregon Convention Center, and they say how to do that. So the other half is, what does FanExpo provide? Because you need these two to work together. FanExpo also has accessibility on their website, and with larger conventions, again, they're probably going to have something on their website. If it's a really small convention, you might have to email. They have an accessibility tab. They have frequently asked questions, which I really appreciate. For example, if you need an ASL interpreter for main events, they can get that for you if you give them enough time. What if you have like a medical companion? Like, can you get an extra badge free to go with you if you need someone to do that? Who should have like medical stickers? So with larger cons, they'll put a little sticker on your badge if you need ADA access, and you get like, you know, early seating to panels. And a lot of smaller cons, it's not necessary to have those things because there is no wait line for things, because it's only like, you know, 50 people in a library or something. But for these larger cons, they'll usually have something like an ADA line where you can get your tickets faster, you don't have to stand as long, things like that. I like to look at walkthroughs of the con area. But sometimes they have like official ones, like, you know, you can do virtual tours of the venue. But I think it's even better if you can see what the con looked like in a previous year. So if those video walkthroughs of like the artist alley where someone walks through with a camera and you can see, that's really helpful to see things like crowding, because if it is too crowded, you can't get your wheelchair through. It has been a bit crowded in the exhibitors hall. I was only there for like 30 minutes and it was pretty difficult to get a wheelchair through. So just knowing things like that, and how far apart are the artist alley tables. I've had cons where they're too close together and it's impossible. So being able to see how it looks when it's actually set up is super useful. My other advice is just like scheduling breaks. And I think a lot of people who've been ill for like a long time, you know what how your body is going to react, and you can plan how much you can really do in a day. For me, it's only like 1 or 2 big events and I need to take a break. Having a priority of like, what can I actually do? Like maybe my number one thing to do is do the cosplay contest, but if I have enough energy, I'll do a panel too. And just like having an idea realistically in your mind of like what you can do. What about if you want to work at a con, which is what I am doing in this moment? That is something that will probably not be on the website because it's a bit more specific. But that is something you will have to send an email, usually in advance a lot, and ask for accommodations. So for example, I asked for that wheelchair lift to be in this room. That was something I asked for, and I am only presenting panels in the room with the wheelchair lift. So asking for that like far enough in advance they can plan, because the thing is, the venue and the con, they need to communicate. And that can take some time because you have entire teams of people working and they need to communicate to each other. The Oregon Convention Center owns that lift. So FanExpo had to say, hey, can you like set the lift up when you are setting stuff up? And they were like, yeah, sure can do. Tell me which panel room. And then the con had to get back and be like, okay, which panel room are we going to put Colleen in? And then, you know, so this takes time. I used to email like a month in advance, but you might need like 6 months and then checking up. And I'm sorry. I know that it's a lot of effort. You shouldn't have to. I would love if like every area of everything was accessible, but this is just the world we live in. So you're going to have to, you know, keep up and kind of ask questions. And then just finally, you should never have to reveal your diagnosis in order to get accommodations. I'll usually just say, I am a wheelchair user, but even if you don't use a wheelchair and you have an invisible disability and you're just like, hey, I want a wheelchair ramp for the cosplay contest, like that should absolutely be enough. And if it is not enough, that should be a red flag. That should be like, maybe I don't want to attend your con. So let's hear some advice from other people in the community. I think the biggest advice I have to offer is to not push yourself. Use assistive tools and devices to make things easier, make yourself take breaks, lean on your support system unapologetically. Remember that there will always be another con if you don't finish this one thing. Your health and well-being are so much more. And that's from Lacey Moonstone. And like, absolutely, Kyra behind the camera has been leaned on unapologetically for 3 days straight now. I always have to think about ease of mobility when picking cosplay to do. Scheduling breaks also helps, especially when you have a con schedule. That's from Duncan with Nike, who is pictured on the side. I make sure to get on-site lodgings in case of a bad flare-up. That is Prismatic Cosplay. So yeah, also thinking about how much energy does it take for you to even get here? Is that something you need to, you know, factor into the equation? I always have my emergency kit with me. Even when I'm traveling solo, I need meds, first aid items, and something comfy. That's Sailor Joestar Cosplay, who's featured in the picture. My HEDS results in joint instability and migraines, and as I started competing in cosplay competitions, I've been reaching out to con staff to ensure that I'll have a designated chair backstage as well as in the wings in case of any issues, especially as things can come on quickly. That's from Egg Cos. I always check out the convention for silent places and easy accessible places to sit as well as elevators so I can find and sit with my energy levels go low or my leg sauce being able to support me. That's T-Tails time. And this convention does have quiet spaces. I don't know if you know of them, but they have, it's called the Book Nook. It's like a manga library is what they're usually called, the anime cons. That is a quiet place. And then Cosplay HQ, where I am, it has been a quiet place. It has cosplay repair, changing rooms, and just tables and chairs. The Zen Den. Oh, I haven't heard of that.
It's got like bean bags and like low lighting and tables with like puzzles and stuff.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's right next to, I want to say it's right close to the Book Nook.
Okay, yeah, I think it's in that corner. Okay, so that's even better that they have the lower lights and the sensory stuff.
Yeah, it's like soft lighting.
Oh, that's perfect. Like back in ye old days, I feel like I just never saw that, but now it's becoming a standard that most conventions have a quiet space if you're just overstimulated and you need like a break. Definitely like locating those before you even get to the con so you know where to go. I'm not ready to commit to a rollator or wheelchair yet, so my stool enables me to sit down whenever and wherever I need to. I don't have to walk away from friends to find a seat. I just pop out my own and I can keep socializing. That's from Chelbell Cosplay, a fellow YouTuber. She's amazing, who's also featured in the picture. I make a big point of letting con staff know, nicely, when parts of the con are inaccessible and when they could easily be made accessible. And I share this on my stories. Able-bodied people aren't always able to know what's an obstacle and what's not, even when they want to help. That's from Lychee Cosplays 24. And that is another thing that a lot of times when I've asked for accessibility, it's not that the con doesn't want disabled people there. They just don't know. They don't know it's an issue. How could they know? How could they know? No one's brought it up before to their attention. There's been a lot of cons I competed at when I was able-bodied, and then I was like, okay, I'm using mobility aids now. Oh wait, this con has always had stairs to get on stage. And I never even noticed until I couldn't get up the stairs. So then I emailed the con and I'm like, hey, can you like get a wheelchair ramp or a lift or something? And they'd be like, yeah, we can. We can. The venue has one. We just didn't request one because like no one's ever thought of it. Like sometimes it can be as simple as no one's thought of it. And then on the flip side, I'd also say when a con does really good, I think it's also really helpful to give positive feedback too and say like, you did this thing and I don't know if you meant it, like maybe it was accidental accessibility, but this really helped me and I really like this. And then cons know to keep that feature. So let's talk about making cosplays, and you don't have to make cosplays to cosplay. You can do store-bought cosplays from your closet. You don't have to make them yourself. I just wanted to talk about this if you wanted that to be a part of the hobby. Some people want to make the costumes themselves. What I do, I just make everything sitting down. Most things can be adapted to sitting. It's just we are so used to seeing certain tasks done standing, sometimes you don't think about it. Things like doing the dishes, I feel like has always traditionally been seen as like a standing chore. Like you always do the dishes standing, and cooking is always standing. I do it sitting down on a stool. So a lot of times you just don't think like, oh, I could do this sitting. It's just traditionally not done that way. So being able to like kind of think outside the box a little bit more creatively and find ways to do things sitting down. So I do all my fabric cutting and such. I sit on the floor. If I had like a huge table where I don't have to sit like crisscross applesauce on the carpet, I agree, that'd be better for my back. I'm 100% behind you. I just don't have that set up. So I'm making do with the crafting space that I have. So cutting fabric, pinning fabric. I also do wig styling, sitting on the floor or sitting on a chair, and I just adjust the height of the wig stand. I do fabric dyeing. That's the same place I cook also. So that's also how I cook, is I just have stuff on the stove and I sit on like a wooden stool. So I fabric dye while I'm sitting. The only things I haven't been able to really figure out to do while sitting is like huge prop making, like with table saws or something. And I just have chosen not to do that or to have my husband do those things for me. I'm sure it could be adapted if I was serious enough about it, but when you get power tools in the mix, there's a little bit more safety that has to be considered. So I'll just stick with, sewing. I know what I'm good at. I'm going to stick with sewing. And a lot of times I'll even sit on the couch just sit on the couch and lay in bed. Like, you don't have to be in a craft room to be crafting. You can lay in bed. I set my dress form up to the height of where I'm sitting on a stool. And another thing is I always fit my costumes to my seated form because I use a wheelchair at cons. I don't use a wheelchair at home all the time. I use like crutches at home sometimes, but at cons it has to be a wheelchair, and that's where I'm going to be wearing the costumes, so I fit to the seated form so that everything fits good when I'm sitting for long days. Another little thing I also want to mention was just like the huge world of adaptive tools. I have tools for like zipping and unzipping zippers if your hand mobility isn't good enough to like grasp the little zipper thing. Button tools if you have trouble doing buttons on your own. I have a pair of electric scissors, which has been really great because the like movement of doing the scissors over and over again was really hurting my hand and my wrist. The list can go on for forever, basically. There's a huge amount of adaptive tools out there for crafting or anything you can think of. I have them for jar openers too. Just if there's anything that's, you're like, this in particular is hard, it's worth doing a Google search and seeing if someone's thought of a way to have a tool to help out. How I approach making costumes, because I do have fatigue, and I also work like a normal, boring corporate desk job, so I only have so much energy on the weekdays. But I believe that working a bit at a time is better than not at all. There are some days after work, all I will do is thread my sewing machine. That is it. I'll go into the craft room, thread the sewing machine, and leave. And, you know, in the past, I would have been like, that's pointless. Like, why would you bother? But if, you know, on Monday I thread the sewing machine, then on Tuesday I pull out the pattern and put it on the desk, and then on Wednesday I pick out the pattern pieces I need. By the weekend, I could walk into my craft room and everything's ready to cut out. So those little things add up. They will add up. And even planning is another thing, is like if I'm really tired, I'll lay in bed, have my eyes closed, and I'll just think of the order I need to sew things. So if I'm making like a shirt or something, I'll be like, okay, I need to do the front seams first. Oh, there's an applique, so I need to do the applique, and then I'll do the back seams, then the shoulder seams. Okay, we're gonna need a zipper or maybe buttons. What do I think will be better? And just like planning out like those things actually goes a long way too, because when I do feel good, when I have that day I feel great, I will walk into the craft room and I know exactly what I'm about to do. And then also just like, what is something that is hard enough you need that good day, and what's easy enough you can do it on one of those days that's a bit harder. And then just like, don't con crunch. Like, even if you aren't disabled, don't con crunch. I mean, that's just when you make your costume last minute, you procrastinate, and then you're staying up till midnight sewing a costume. Please just don't con crunch. It's not worth it. It's never worth it. Now about like wearing costumes, whether you made it yourself or bought it, you know, however you want to cosplay, that's fine. How about wearing them? Make sure that you test how you can wear them. Can you use the restroom in your costume? This is critically important as someone who has been at a convention in a costume, had to use the bathroom, and realized I could not get out a thing on my own. And the other thing I would say is whatever mobility aid you'll be using at the con. So like I said, I don't use the wheelchair much in the home. I use crutches a lot more, but I'm going to use the wheelchair at the con. So I want to make sure that I could transfer from the wheelchair to the bathroom, and things like that. Making sure you can do that so you don't get to con or your photo shoot or whatever and realize you have issues. Can you travel through the vendor's hall, fit through doors, fit in elevators? You want to test that out as much as you can beforehand so there's not an emergency at con. I've had plenty of times where I wore a thing and my wheelchair ate it. It just like munched on the skirt or munched on the cape. And I've had like a week or so to make some adjustments or pick a different cosplay before I take it to a con. And then do you need help, like knowing that in advance? So I've needed help with a lot of things this weekend. I needed help filming is another thing. It's not disability related, but I need help, and being able to ask in advance. And safety is always more important than accuracy. If you look at what this lady is wearing, this is from Sailor Moon, her hair is on the floor, like dragging on the floor. Her dress is dragging on the floor. Her wings are the size of her body. Even if you were healthy, I would not recommend making this costume. at all. Like, please do not come to a con with hair dragging feet behind you. That's not going to be safe for anyone. I get so many people being like, hey, I want to do this thing that will completely wreck my body because this character looks like this. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you? No, please don't. please do things that are good for you. I can't talk too much about cosplay contests, but as someone who's competed in over 20 contests and as someone who is judged, if you explain to the judges the decisions you made and why you made them, you're fine. You're fine. The judge is not going to knock off points because your hair is not trailing 4 feet behind you. You just need to explain this is a safety issue, and instead I did some extra work to figure out how long it could be. I tested it myself, like, okay, now we have something to talk about, the work and the problem solving that went into making this costume. And then just making mobility aids part of your costume. So I like to dress up my wheelchair, dress up my crutches to make them look really awesome. I have a whole other panel I did specifically on adaptive design, so I'm not going to go into too much of it here because I have talked about this for like 45 minutes straight. But just know that there's a lot of ways that you can sew costumes differently so that they work with your disability. Let's hear some advice from some other people. For bodices, I put zippers at the side seams under your armpit. Sometimes I do one side, sometimes I do both. I also always bring at least one cosplay that can be worn regardless of pain or mobility aid I need that day by Night and Needle. This costume was supposed to have a wig, and I just ditched the wig today, so having a comfy backup. I have MS, and so my disability varies significantly day to day. I'm not much of a planner, and even with the disability, I can't plan too well. I pretty much go with the flow and create cosplays on days I've got energy, and edit or do 3D modeling and printing on days I don't. The motto to get a cosplay done is to do a little bit of something every day, and that's from Best Girl Cosplay, who's featured in the picture. I use sensory-friendly fabrics, even when less accurate. And I make modifications to adjust for mobility aids. That's from Prismatic Cosplay, who's featured in the picture. Starting early to account for bad days, using adaptive tools. There are so many for sewing and crafting. Adaptive tools are so ubiquitous in sewing that they are not always marketed as adaptive. Examples include compression gloves, spring-loaded or electric scissors, magnifiers, lights, self-threading needles, and more. And that is from Calamity Flare. I only wear costumes that are sensory friendly. I modify or make myself the things that don't work from a costume I bought. I also always make sure noise-canceling headphones can fit over my wig. They are Zinni Cosplay, who is featured in the picture. I put snaps in leotard crotches to avoid zippers so that I can get dressed or go to the bathroom without dealing with a side or back zipper. I also set timers to remember to do care items like stretching to avoid injury and to hydrate, to avoid flare-ups when streaming or recording, and that's from Hoshi Rosethorn Cosplay. You'll also notice, like I said, disability is so diverse and different. And I noticed even in putting this panel together that for different disabilities, people had different opinions on like zippers and closures and like what they physically can do, which just shows like how unique each person is with how they adapt for disability, which I always think is fascinating. I love to see how people do these things. I have low vision, and so I like to use 4 different colored threads in my serger machine. It helps me determine if there are any issues with my machine and which thread is the problem. That's from Jetty Lupe, and I love this hack because, like I said, sometimes it's just using stuff like you've not heard of it being used before. There's no reason you can't use different colored threads on a serger. It will still work. You've just never seen it done that way. I always try to add pockets or a bag that matches my costume at conventions, and I set alarms when I'm off my usual routine schedule so I don't forget. I recently incorporated my back braces into the construction of belts, changed the gloves I wore to heated or compression gloves, and I'm wearing specific insoles and socks, and that's from It's Victoria, y'all. This is a hyper-specific tip that helps me a lot. Sitting in one position for too long hurts really bad, so I don't have a water cup when I'm painting, especially if it's just one color, so I have to get up and stretch and wash the brushes. When it comes to mobility aids and cosplay, decorating to match the cosplay helps confidence a lot. I tend to give myself at least 3 hours to get into cosplay, an hour or 2 for makeup, and then another hour for getting the cosplay on, so I'm not rushing and I'm at lower risk of hurting myself or causing an autistic meltdown, and that's from Nokia Clown. I try to think of a way to include my mobility aids into photos or the cosplay in general, and that's from Gamescraft Cosplay, who's featured in the lovely photo. I have scoliosis, which makes my hips twisted clockwise an inch. That means I have to modify any patterns I use to adapt to my body. That requires a mock-up and a technique I called Frankensteining, where I sew on additional pieces to the mock-up until it gets the perfect fit. And that's from Olicat Cosplay. I just love seeing like how people modify things differently, specifically for themselves. All these ones I've talked about, it's things I never would have thought of because it's not my disability, it's what someone else has, and things that I'm like, oh, I didn't know that would be an issue. So I also want to talk about doing social media. You don't have to do social media to cosplay. It's just if you want to. I found a lot of people, they use social media to get their social interaction, right? A lot of us, we don't leave the house as much as we'd like. We don't get to go to things like this all the time. So social media has been a way to connect with other disabled people, connect with other people in general, other cosplayers. So let's talk about how to do social media like consistently if you would like. I've been running my YouTube channel for multiple years now. I also run Instagram, and how you can, if you want to, post consistently. Lots and lots of planning. Wow, that sounds like everything else we've talked about. And like with making cosplays, determining high and low energy things so you can assign it to high or low energy days. So a high energy day would be a day I feel like really great, and that would be like getting into cosplay and wearing my cosplay. That takes some effort, or like cleaning and setting up if I need to like set up a background for filming. I just put creating costume as high energy. It kind of depends, like we said, but in general. And then like if I'm dancing or acting or like moving a lot, that's also hard. Low energy things are things that I do like on weekdays after work, or I do when I'm not feeling good. So that's basically computer stuff is how you could summarize it. So editing my videos, creating thumbnails, writing captions, just researching, like looking up different wigs I need to buy, answering emails, or just talking voiceovers where I don't have to look nice. So there's actually like a wealth of options that I can still participate in this hobby even if I'm not feeling good, and that really helps with motivation when you can still feel like you're doing something, feel like you got to do a hobby that you enjoy, even if it's just that little bit you could do that day. So I'm gonna throw out a few like YouTuber terms. These are used like very generally in the community. I'm just gonna try and apply them to disability. So one term is content batching, and that's waiting until a good day to film as much as you can. So for example, I got into this costume for a brand deal, and then I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good today. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm gonna film something else for myself too. I got a bunch of pictures, and then I also filmed for a completely different cosplay. I'm like, I have a good face of makeup. I'm gonna film for a whole other build. So I try and never waste a good face of makeup. If I took the effort to get into makeup, which is hard sometimes, I wanna make sure I film and get pictures as much as possible so that the days where I feel pretty bad, I'm like, oh, well, I can do those low energy things like editing those photos that I took on a good day. And you can kind of spread things out and do more of a consistent, if you want to, consistent posting. This is one of my favorite things, and it's called recyclable content. And it's using stuff that you've already made and just editing it differently in a different way. Because I've done YouTube for so long, I have over a terabyte of Colleen Cosplay. It's actually like so much. So that means if I don't feel good for like entire weeks, I can just pull out the old folder of cosplay content and I can edit it in different ways. Like, for example, these are my top 10 favorite cosplays. I'm ranking my, most comfortable to least comfortable cosplays. And you can do that over and over and over again. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not. A lot of times those are the videos that actually do better for me, because you can see kind of like a portfolio of cosplays in one video. The one I'm playing right now went viral, much to my dismay, just because I didn't use a wheelchair at the start, but I did at the end, and people were completely flabbergasted that I didn't just like pop out of the womb with a wheelchair. So it got 1 million views. Hey, I'll take it. Content backlog. I wish I was better at this, but basically having content that's not posted but still done that you can post if you're not feeling good. So unlike, before where we talked about having some like kind of unfinished content that you could edit on bad days, having some completely finished and ready to go stuff that you could post if you're not feeling good. So again, when I do photo shoots, I get a lot of photos and I only post a handful so that I can like wait a few months and then post those photos again. And with the like collective memory of the internet, a lot of people will just like accept it as something new if you wait a few months. And also having videos that are like not time sensitive, that could sit for a little while. Things like convention vlogs, I try and get out really fast while people are still thinking about the convention, but this video where I just show everyone how many wigs I have, that can be posted at any time. So it's like some really good things to have just like in your back pocket. So let's hear what some other people have to say. I try not to think about how fast-paced cosplay content creation can be, and just put stuff out there when it's the best timing for me. I also try to have drafts ready for the bad seasons. I know my health is bad and I won't be able to shoot anything as easily, and it's from Alias, who's featured in the lovely video. I try to get at least 30 photos and 10 videos whenever I get into cosplays, that if I can't cosplay for a couple of months, I still have content to post and edit without having to feel forced to ever do more than my body can allow me to do. That's from Sam Do Cosplay. I take extra content at the beginning of conventions when I have the most energy and try to plan how my mobility aids might interact with my costumes. That's from Pixel.piece. Any reels I do, I normally try and keep it as short snippets put together. That's Duncan with Nike. That's also pretty good advice, to just like, you could just record it in pieces instead of sitting down for an hour. If you can't sit down for an hour and film something. At home, when I'm making content, I always sit comfortably and keep water, heating pads, and other things I might need like meds or even emergency fixes like bobbykins near me, so I limit time spent creating content. That's from It's Victoria, y'all. Stockpile footage. As someone with a dynamic disability, I have a few good days and then weeks at a time where I'm stuck in bed. Record content on good days and save them to edit on bad days. That way it helps keep somewhat consistent content and balances out when I'm able to work on things. And that's from Moth Muse, who is pictured in the photo. I've been making content for the internet, mostly YouTube, for 7 years now. In my experience, trying to get myself to be as consistent as able-bodied creators just isn't possible. Leaving myself the time and space to rest when need be is important. I love to create content and I love to be able to interact with the community. It's an integral part of how I stay social when I'm stuck at home. Even when I can't get out of bed, I'll plan on my notes app and edit what I can on my phone. To create my cosplays, I spend little amounts of time throughout the week to piece things together. Be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. Lastly, comparison, especially to able-bodied creators and cosplayers, is the thief of joy in this work. Things have been adjusted and adapted, and that will probably look different. And that's from Lee the Leaf, who's featured in the photo. I film way in advance, and I use each content to the very last drop. That is from White Kiku. So just kind of a lot of the same sentiment of like know your boundaries, don't push yourself, don't destroy yourself for social media, please. I have experience taking it a little bit too far. Being able to plan and do what you can. And then I just quickly want to talk about brand deals with a disability. If you want to make some sort of money from this, when I was first disabled, I certainly thought that wasn't a thing, because here I was at a con using mobility aids for the first time, and I'm like, there's nobody like me. Oh no. There's nobody like me out there. And there is. There's a wonderful, beautiful disabled community out there. But as I said, disability can look like anything. You could be surrounded by people who are experiencing these things and you'd never know from looking at them. And not everyone is comfortable sharing these things online. So there was like a huge community of disabled people out there, and even some doing work in cosplay, doing things like guesting at cons. So like, what if I'm disabled and I want to make some sort of income? Like I said, for me, I have a regular boring job, but I make a little side hustle money. So a lot of the advice of like, well, pace yourself and don't push it too far. It's like, well, if you have a contract and you're getting paid, unfortunately, if you take on that kind of work, you kind of have to do it, as much as you possibly can, right? You want to be able to deliver on that. For me, a lot of it is planning recovery time for afterwards. So for example, I was at the convention center for 10 hours yesterday, and today I'm not wearing my wig. And after we leave here, I would like to lay down for half a century. So I'm just going to plan to not have anything going on for the next few weeks. And that is what I have planned. Like, as soon as I get home, I will be on the couch. And then just having like really good communication with the people you're working with. So as I said, I have been in contact with FanExpo for like months, literally leading up to this event, talking about like what I might need. Can I take breaks? Where do I go? It's kind of like a constant communication. And then I did actually get to talk to some cosplayers who do also make some side hustle money and are disabled. I only do brand deals when I'm truly interested in the product and given a good amount of time. Sometimes a brand will want me to post a video within 2 weeks, and I won't commit to that because I know I would have to push myself. That's from Bell Cosplay, and that is absolutely a thing. Brands will ask you to do things in 2 weeks. And I also have started to say no to that because I am tired. What helps me out when on deadlines for deals is list making and deciding based on energy levels which pieces of the list to tackle each day. That's from Lovable Spiral, who is featured in the picture. So I feel like this is all just the same advice, planning ahead and knowing your limits. And when it comes to like signing contracts, thinking really long and hard before you sign it. Like, is this something I can physically do? And if I can't, what is my game plan? But it's something that absolutely can be done. And there are disabled cosplayers who are making money from this, guesting, working, doing social media, everything. Like, we're everywhere. Disabled cosplayers are all around you. Okay, so I could take a question or two if there are any questions. Yeah, go for it.
One question I have is, have you ever had a con be like, we offer accessibility, we offer all these things, and then kind of showed up and they're like, what do you mean?
Yes, I have. So I have had a few instances in my life which has developed trust issues, which haunt me to this day, where events have promised that they will have a certain amount of accessibility, like a ramp or something, and then I have arrived and it was not there. Like, the biggest thing I can suggest is a lot of times I won't attend unless I can see they had one a previous year. And I know that that's kind of a sucky answer because you don't want to be like, I can't go to this first year con because I have trust issues. But if that's something you're worried about, most conventions, or at least a lot of them, will have video footage of certain events. I would, if you can, like, do some Googling, some YouTubing, and see what it looked like the year previous. And I've even like talked to people, and cosplayers are so amazing. I've been like, hey, I saw you attended this event last year. What are your thoughts on like if a wheelchair could get around here? And that's been really good. And because I'm big into cosplay contests, I will like go online and like super sleuth. Like, if they had a ramp, I'll like try and get multiple angles because sometimes you can't like see it. And I'll be like, okay, they had a ramp last year. And like, in my experience, if a convention has figured out how to get a ramp, they're not gonna like take it away. Like, once they've made that connection with the venue and they've put in the orders in previous years, they're not going to be like, hey, that ramp we've had for 5 years, get rid of it. Like, that's not like an action that's done. So I know it's not a great answer, but like, maybe only attending cons that have the accessibility you're looking for proven in previous years. Yeah, go for it.
How would I go about accommodating props with like my cane? Because yesterday, I had my gun and my bag on this side, and I have to have my cane on this side, and I can't have anything on this side. So, how do I go about doing that?
Like, how you can carry it?
Yeah.
If you can attach to your back and it's comfortable to reach around to your back. And I've also seen people do like leg holsters if that's comfortable. Even if it's not like how the character wears it, then like maybe you can still do it. A lot of the times I just don't bring the prop. Again, not a great answer, but with a lot of characters, I will just be like, this prop isn't for me. I don't have the energy for this. So just knowing your limits and if you want to adapt or not. Okay, I think we're done here, but thank you guys so much for coming.